Another day, another recap. Today's movie recap is a bit out of the ordinary. Its main man is Joaquin Phoenix in a psychological action thriller movie titled You Were Never Really Here. Enjoy the recap. Our story begins with a mysterious countdown from 10, and as soon as it ends, things take a very strange turn. A photograph and a book are set on fire, and a man meticulously cleans a blood-stained hammer. He collects several items from a bed, one of which bears the name Sandy. Leaving the hotel room, we meet a man with a chilling demeanor, marking him as a ruthless killer. Surprisingly, this cold-hearted individual is attacked in a nearby alley, but the assault seems to have no effect on him. Unfazed, he continues his journey, heading towards the airport. During his cab ride, the driver fills the air with song, and it's here we're introduced to our main character, Joe. After a brief pause to drink, our man Joe places a call to John McCleary, succinctly reporting that his task is complete. The scene shifts to Joe arriving at a home where he greets his seemingly sleeping mother. But it seems she's actually awake and was just playing around. There seems to be a real Joker vibe going on here, and Joe sees to it that she's comfortably settled in her bed for the night. In a quiet moment to himself, Joe's shirt comes off, revealing a tapestry of scars etched across his back, a silent testament to his brutal past. He passes the time with a book, a contemplative gaze out the window, and a peculiar interaction with his blade. Disturbed by his mother's call from the restroom, Joe indulges in a bit of macabre play acting outside the bathroom door, mimicking a stabbing before attending to her needs. His care is tender as he assists her, then dutifully cleans the flooded bathroom floor. Exiting the house, Joe's mother watches him from a window. Joe heads down the footpath of a bustling street and enters a local store. In the back, a man named Angel hands over a bag. Inside, a substantial sum of money. Joe learns that the man urgently requests his presence. When he inquires about Angel's son potentially seeing him, Angel dismisses it as coincidence, but Joe isn't convinced and declares their work finished. Joe moves to the storefront, spotting Angel's son Moises behind the counter, a possible silent witness to the life his father and Joe are entangled in. Later on, Joe sits with his mother, and the two sing made-up songs to each other. Joe quickly complains that her fridge is disgusting and everything is past expiry date. His mother asks him how Janice is, and Joe tells her that he doesn't know as he hasn't seen her in 20 years. That night, Joe is doing some breathing exercises, if you know what I mean, and remembers himself doing the same thing as a boy. The following day, Joe is at a train station, and a woman just eyes him out. He heads to a beautifully constructed building and meets up with John McCleary. It seems the money he received was from a family who paid him when he got their missing daughter home safe. Joe tells McCleary that he wants to lose Angel's number and find a new service. McCleary says that he can just call him directly like a normal person, but Joe refuses to do so as he begins eating some lollies. The reason for the meetup is the state senator Albert Votto. The senator's wife was found dead a couple years ago, and it seems their teenage daughter has been running away from the house ever since. But problematically, she has been gone much longer than usual, and the senator refuses to involve the police, as it would ruin his reputation. He is offering $50,000 in cash, and has a clue to start with when they meet face to face. With that, Joe takes off and heads right back to the station and eventually makes his way to the senator, who has a message of an address where he found out she was staying at. He explains his daughter's name is Nina, and that he is petrified if something happened to her. It seems Joe has received a reputation for being brutal, and that's what the senator expects of him if Nina's kidnappers are the real deal. It's time for the hunt, and we see Joe is not an assassin for hire, but merely an assassin to find missing lost girls. With that, he heads down to the local pharmacy to grab his much-needed medicine. He drives past the address the senator provided, and instead makes his way to a local store near the area. He grabs some duct tape and along the way spots a beautiful hammer. He just stops and stares at it and decides he must have it. On the way back to his car, he walks past a few women who ask him if they can take a photo of them. He agrees, and when he goes to snap a photo, he sees one lady crying, and the scene cuts to a nightmare. Joe is a very traumatized man to the point that he actually sees things that are not there. He heads off to buy some drugs, and the man walks in and comes back out. Joe smacks the guy for making him wait. As the night deepens, Joe unpacks the items he just bought and then decides to hit the steam room. Problematically though, he has a towel over his face and tries to calm himself down. But this does absolutely nothing and actually triggers a past trauma when he was in the army. He was shot and left for dead but managed to survive. He comes back to reality and stares at himself in a mirror. Funnily enough, he smiles, and the scene cuts to Joe driving through the streets, driving from street to street and even witnessing an emergency situation. Joe continues his journey until he finally arrives at the destination provided by the senator where his daughter is most likely being held. Joe stakes out the place and has a quick power nap. Sometime later, he spots a car pulled up in front of the building, and he has another memory pop up in his head. This one is pretty freaky, and this wakes him up. Within seconds, Joe exits his car and grabs one of the boys exiting from that house and interrogates him about how much security is inside the building. The boy blabbers and tells him there is only 2 guards, and when Joe asks where the missing girls are, he tells him level 3 and also gives him the code for the front door. Joe then puts the young lad to sleep, and now it gets serious. He heads straight to the front door, takes out the first guard with his trusted accomplice, the hammer. He goes on to kill the second guard and finds a third. He rushes to a room and finds Nina, who is out of it and just counts down from 30 to mute the world around her. He takes Nina and walks straight to his car. The girl seems very out of it and begins to enjoy the scenery she hasn't seen in some time. Joe parks the car in an underground car park, and Nina gives him a big hug. He tells Nina he's waiting for her dad to come, and when the rain begins pouring down, they duo make their way inside a hotel for the night. Joe watches some TV and Nina stares at her photo as they wait for the senator's arrival. The poor girl is completely out of it and watches some TV. Very problematically though, Senator Vato is being spoken about, which states he was found dead, and it seems as though the pressure of politics got to him. Joe comforts Nina and knows something very wrong is happening. Someone knocks on the door, and when Joe answers, the man in front is shot dead and 2 police officers come running in and hold the 2 at gunpoint. They grab Nina and she screams for him. Joe then looks at the officer in the room and distracts him until he smacks a table into him and belts the copper senseless until he eventually kills him. He follows this by walking out of the hotel and takes a small breather. He goes to a nearby phone booth to call McCleary, who does not answer him. Joe immediately gets to traveling and after some time finally makes his way back to his house. He enters it very carefully and quietly. He grabs a hidden gun from the drawer and gets back to the street, where he recklessly drives towards McCleary's office. When he enters though, it seems his friend was brutally killed, and Joe picks up his phone and calls Angel. But it's too late for him and his son as well. Joe begins speeding around the street and his PTSD is surfacing once again. He imagines his childhood and screams, until the scene cuts to Joe at his mother's house. But when he enters, he also sees that these killers have hunted down and killed everyone involved with him and Nina. Joe then remembers his past as he aims a gun down the stairs. He fires 2 shots and manages to kill one man but injure another. The wounded man crawls on the floor and Joe asks him which one of them killed his mother. When the intruder remains quiet, Joe presses him with questions until he reveals that Nina is with Governor Williams and she is his favorite. With that, the 2 men then stop talking and lie down beside each other. They sing the song that's playing on the stereo until the intruder finally dies. Back in the car, Joe's heart is broken seeing everyone around him just suddenly be killed. He stares at the body bag in his car and continues driving through the street and makes his way out of the city. He carries the lifeless body into a river with him and makes sure it sinks to the bottom. After walking away, his rage is built up, and using that aggression, he makes his way onto public transport. He places his head on the window, and as he imagines Nina's face, he speeds through the city, and it's very hard to depict what is going on in Joe's mind at this time. But nonetheless, he heads to find Governor Williams as well as Nina. He patiently waits outside the building where the man is staying, and before you know it, he steps out with some security. Joe eyes him out and watches the man step into a car. Joe obviously follows him, and they go from road to road until he finally sees where the governor is living. Inside the governor's house, the wicked man has photos of Nina and doll houses around the house. Joe gets out of the car and makes his way onto the property with his hammer and kills the guard out front. He takes out one more in the kitchen and climbs a flight of stairs. Walking through the hallways armed with his hammer, he enters a bedroom and spots an empty child's bed. He looks around but finds the governor dead on the ground. He takes a seat on the bed and places his hands on his head. It seems he's in quite some pain as he reminisces about his life and traumas. Throwing away his shirt, he begins crying and soon enough goes walking through the house. He walks downstairs and looks at the empty hallways. There he goes to the first room to find his mother. Continuing through the house, he spots himself as a kid and keeps on walking to finally find Nina eating some red meat, if you know what I mean. She enjoys her snack with her bloodied hands and Joe sits next to her to comfort her. I mean, she looks like she really doesn't need it. Honestly, she's developed quite some psychopathic traits. Anyways, Joe heads to the gas station with a new white shirt as Nina remains in the car. Later, the duo head to get some proper food and Nina asks Joe where they are headed. He has no clue and gives her the option to travel where she wants. But she too has no destination in mind. With that, the two just sit on the table thinking on what's the plan from here on out. Nina gets up and walks off, leaving Joe to sit alone on the table. Joe listens to the people around him and sheds a tear. Then boom, he is shot dead, but no one around notices. Then Nina comes walking back and asks him to wake up. He does so, and this duo is one psychotic couple that are going to need some serious help. And that's the end. I know this was a very different type of recap than I normally do, but if you enjoyed it, make sure to comment down below to let me know what other movies you'd like recapped. Until the next one.